Welcome, everyone. Today, we are opening up an absolutely mind-bending 13th century esoteric puzzle. We're going to be digging into the groundbreaking research of Professor Moshe Idel to uncover a story that bridges totally different faiths, hidden mathematics, and, well, a pretty massive theological twist. Over the course of this explainer, we'll walk through a radical reimagining of religious history, decoding the mystery step by step. So let's just jump right into one of the most fascinating historical intersections of Judaism and Christianity that's ever been recorded.
Our story starts with a massive historical mystery. I want you to picture the year 1280. The political and religious tensions in Europe are incredibly high, right? And right in the middle of all this, a Jewish mystic named Abraham Abulafia decides to undertake what is essentially a suicidal mission. He travels to Rome to directly confront the most powerful man in Europe, Pope Nicholas III. Now, the obvious question here is why? Why on earth would a 13th century kabbalist march right into the heart of the Vatican? Well, to figure that out, we have to decode the radical theology that actually motivated this brazen act. Okay, let's dive into this timeline. Abulafia wasn't just some casual scholar. He was the founder of what is known as ecstatic Kabbalah. He spent his early years deep in intense esoteric studies, which eventually led him to a really profound epiphany. And this wasn't just a personal revelation. To him, it was a literal cosmic mandate. It completely compelled his journey to Rome. He genuinely believed he had to orchestrate a papal confrontation. The tension here is just unbelievable, too, because the Pope had actually issued orders to burn Abulafia at the stake the second he arrived. But before we can fully grasp what he planned to say to the Pope, we need to take a look at the theological framework operating in the background. Which brings us to Section 1, the dual Messiah tradition. To truly understand what Abulafia was attempting, we first need to get a handle on the traditional concepts he was working with.
See, according to traditional Jewish eschatology, the end of days isn't just brought about by one single figure. There's this deeply rooted concept of two distinct messiahs working in sequence. It's kind of like a two-part relay. The first is Moshiach ben Yoseph, the Messiah, son of Joseph. This guy is a preliminary, tragic figure. His destiny is to fight the apocalyptic wars, suffer, and ultimately die. He's the necessary precursor. The second figure is Moshiach ben David, the Messiah, son of David. This is the ultimate, victorious, kingly redeemer who arrives after the precursor to establish lasting peace. Keep this dual structure in the back of your mind, because Abulafia is about to do something incredibly daring with it.
Moving on to Section 2, decoding the mystic math. What Professor Moshe Idel's research uncovers is that Abulafia didn't just study these two messianic roles. He used a very specific, esoteric method to slot a world-famous historical figure directly into the system. To pull this off, Abulafia relied on something called gematria. By computing the total numerical value of a Hebrew word or phrase, mystics look for other words with the exact same value to reveal hidden structural connections. It's essentially the math of secrets. And Abulafia used this mathematical matrix to decode what he saw as the absolute true nature of theology. And this brilliantly illustrates the radical nature of his findings. Just take a look at this table based on Professor Idel's research. Abulafia calculated the gematria of the Hebrew phrase for Jesus of Nazareth, Yeshu HaNozri. The numerical value is 671. He then found that this perfectly matched the value for the Hebrew phrase Yom HaShishi, which means the sixth day. In Abulafia's system, the sixth day, Friday, the day right before the Sabbath, represents the preliminary, struggling phase of the Messianic millennium. By mathematically linking Jesus to the sixth day, Abulafia was objectively casting him in the role of Moshiach ben Yoseph. He wasn't dismissing Jesus at all. He was integrating him into the Jewish esoteric structure as that necessary, suffering precursor we just talked about.
So, on to Section 3, the alien God concept. Abulafia didn't stop there. He moved to an even deeper, significantly more provocative layer of this mystical decoding. He zeroed in on another highly specific number, 316. Professor Idel highlights this exact number as a great secret within Abulafia's complex esoteric framework. It unlocks a whole other layer of how Abulafia viewed the spiritual source of Christianity. The Hebrew name Yeshu yields the numeric value of 316. This is absolutely identical to the value of the Hebrew phrase Elohei Nekar, which translates to alien God. Now hold on. It is totally crucial to understand this impartially, exactly as Idel analyzes it. For Abulafia, the term alien God was not meant as a demonic slur or some petty insult.
Actually, in his highly technical Kabbalistic classification, it just indicated that Jesus drew his spiritual strength from a different, subordinate divine realm, rather than the ultimate, unified Godhead. It essentially legitimized Jesus as a spiritual force, but categorized that force as alien or separate, which perfectly fits his role as the preliminary, distinct Messiah ben Yoseph. And that brings us to Section 4, a Kabbalist Son of God. This is where we hit the ultimate twist in Abulafia's theology. Because if Jesus was designated as the suffering precursor, the Messiah ben Yoseph of the sixth day, who exactly was meant to be the triumphant king of the seventh day? To claim that role, Abulafia relied heavily on the concept of unio mystica. This is the highest ecstatic and spiritual union a human mind can possibly achieve with the divine active intellect. In Abulafia's ecstatic Kabbalah, this wasn't just something you casually read about in a book. It was a spiritual mechanism. It was an intensely lived experience that allowed a living, breathing mystic to achieve ultimate divine elevation and literal communion with God. So the crucial point is that Abulafia claimed this ecstatic union for himself. He engaged in an act of breathtaking cosmic one-upmanship. Because he truly believed he had achieved this ultimate union, Abulafia boldly reclaimed the very title of Son of God for himself. But unlike the suffering son on the cross, Abulafia cast himself as the victorious, living Messiah ben David. He firmly believed that he was the triumphant king destined to complete the eschatological drama that Jesus had only just begun. Which leads us to Section 5, the matrix of redemption. Let's take all these intricate puzzle pieces, the dual messiahs, the hidden math, the precursor, and the self-proclaimed king, and bring them all right back to the year 1280 to finally answer our opening question. Professor Moshe Idel describes Abulafia's worldview perfectly right here. He calls it a matrix of speculations in Judaism about the Messianic drama. When Abulafia marched toward Rome, he wasn't just some hot-headed radical looking for a fight. Grounded in this academic authority, we see that Abulafia actually viewed his impending encounter with the Pope as a grand, literal reenactment of Moses confronting Pharaoh. He was stepping right into the matrix to play his part as the ultimate redeemer. Now this is a massive paradigm shift. Idel's research clearly shows that the 1280 mission was never meant to be a standard religious debate or just some mundane attempted conversion. Abulafia wasn't trying to make the Pope Jewish in a conventional sense, not at all. Instead, it was an attempt to initiate a grand, inclusive, mystical vision. Abulafia wanted to unite different faiths under one divine name, using a shared, higher mystical discourse. He honestly believed that if he could just explain these hidden mathematical truths to the Pope, he could trigger the ultimate redemption for literally all of humanity. Let's move on and see how this builds into one cohesive, grand strategy. We can summarize Abulafia's multi-layered messianic theater in 3 crystal-clear steps. Step 1, through esoteric math, objectively define Jesus as the necessary precursor, the suffering Messiah ben Yoseph. Step 2, elevate himself through unio mystica as the triumphant king, Messiah ben David. And Step 3, confront the Pope, the absolute ultimate representative of the precursor's religion, to merge these timelines and trigger the Messianic era. I mean, it is a stunningly complex architectural structure of theology and history. As we wrap up this explainer, I really want to leave you with a lingering thought. Abulafia's story, masterfully uncovered by Professor Idel, shows us that historical religious divides weren't always black and white. Sometimes they were connected by a hidden math, an esoteric matrix that sought to weave seemingly opposing figures into a single grand narrative. So how does decoding the hidden math of history change your understanding of religious dialogue today? Really think about that. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into the mystical convergence. I hope this exploration leaves you eager to dig even deeper into Professor Moshe Idel's truly fascinating research.